Good evening, everybody. It's great to see everybody here. My name is Ian Gordon. I'm the head of the College of Science and Engineering. I get the pleasure to do the emergency procedures at all of the inaugural lectures. So if there's no fire expected. If there is a fire, there's a fire exit here. You can also exit that way. This is the inaugural lecture of Desen, Kirli. I get the pleasure to do lots of inaugural lectures of big professors and things like that as well. I have to say secretly, so don't tell any of the big professors who've recently done an inaugural lecture, that actually it's really great to have a lot of variety and find out all of the kind of the really new, fresh stuff as well. So I'm looking forward to this very much. I've heard a lot about some of this already, so it will be great to hear more. And I'll pass across now to David, who will do the proper introduction. David.
Thank you very much. So, I have the pleasure to introduce Desen as one of the Elizabeth Georgeson Fellows, and she's going to give the Elizabeth Georgeson lecture this evening. We set up the Elizabeth Georgeson Fellows to encourage more women to get involved in engineering and to develop their careers as academics. And it's just worth saying a few words about Elizabeth Georgeson. She was, at the age of 21, she undertook an engineering degree at the University of Edinburgh. She joined the university in 1916 and graduated in 1919, becoming the first woman in Scotland to graduate in engineering. And so we set up these fellowships in her name. And it's been a great delight to have Desen and Winnie as the first two Elizabeth Georgeson Fellows. And so Desen is going to give the lecture this evening. She's somewhat of a homegrown talent, and you will see from her biography that she's worked with us for quite a while. And she's going to give a very, very interesting talk this evening, and I'm greatly looking forward to it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to you to give the lecture. And I should remind the audience that we don't have formal questions and answers at the end, so there's an opportunity to have a discussion informally afterwards. Okay. So, with that, listen.
Perfect. Thank you, David, for the intro, and Ian as well. And thank you to all of you for making your way here today. I will be talking to you about how we can connect the dots. So people, data, digitalization, and net zero, how all of these things can come together to help us pave the way to net zero and help reach it quicker. So as Dev mentioned, I currently hold the Elizabeth Georgeson Fellowship, so I want to start my talk. I've divided into 5 parts. First, talking about who Elizabeth Georgeson is, why she is important to me, and I think she should be important to you as well. And then talk about my journey to this point, because I'm hoping to inspire some of you or all of you, no matter what your career stage is. Well, at least I hope to. So who is Elizabeth Georgeson and why is she important to me, but also should be important to you? As David mentioned, she is Scotland's first female engineering graduate and started studying here in 1916. So it's not a history lecture, but let me ask you, what was happening at that time? It was a big event. Can someone chime in and maybe just tell me the answer? What was happening in 19... World War I. Yeah, exactly, World War I. So it is interesting that she actually starts her studies at this time because there is an opportunity for women to take up different roles within the society, and she leverages this and graduates from an engineering degree for the first time in Scotland. She's a true trailblazer, and she's also one of the early members of the Women's Engineering Society. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a lot of photos of her online, but I got this from the Edinburgh Mathematical Colloquium, which was held in St. Andrews in 1937, and that's Elizabeth in the corner. So there is also a little clue here on this slide that I will come back to at the end of the lecture. This is to keep you engaged a little bit. But if you follow me on LinkedIn, you might already know what the clue is on the slide that will help me connect this slide to the last slide of my presentation. So how did I end up here on this stage today? As Ian mentioned, it's usually people that have they're very well esteemed at professorial level who get to give these lectures. But we were lucky enough to be also offered this stage as Elizabeth Georgeson Fellows. You already know from my bio that I hold this fellowship in data and digitalization and energy systems. But what about the previous steps? I want to be transparent about this in the hopes that I can inspire other people who might want to choose a similar career path. So let's have a look. I hold a Master of Engineering degree in Sustainable Energy Engineering, but well before this, and before Edinburgh became my home for the last 11 years, I was actually somewhere else. So that's us in Scotland, and you can probably tell from my name, my accent, and various other tells that I'm not Scottish or British. This is where I come from on the map. It's not very relevant, but it helps to set the tone for my talk of why I chose a career in sustainable energy. Coming from Cyprus, I'm used to blackouts and diesel generators often being owned by people or businesses just to have there in case the power goes out so they can keep on running the ACs and keeping the lights on. So coming from a country like this, I was like, okay, these diesel generators are not helping to solve the problem. We definitely need a different solution to this. And coming here, in my 4th year of the university, I noticed that, wait a second, they use the same thing in the UK, so what's happening? And I started to learn about how there are diesel farms here, which are basically empty plots of land with lots of diesel generators scattered across it. And they stay there on standby to supply national grid with backup power if needed. And I need to give here special thanks to a company who took me on for a 6-month placement. They're Flexitricity, who are the pioneer in demand-side response. And together with them, I found out about how we can help balance the grid in different ways. So I stayed on with Flexitricity for a while and have done my final project with them, where we started looking into how we can replace these diesel generators with grid-scale batteries. While it sounds like a like-for-like substitution, actually it's not at all, because diesel will always have the fuel by its side, but when you have a battery, you need to decide when to charge it and when to discharge it, and you might just be caught with 0% charge and be unable to serve the grid. So there's a lot of complexity that goes into it, starting with where do we connect it, how do we manage it, but how do we also make the most profit from it, because that's just how the world is. We can't pay the bills by shaving carbon emissions, and maintaining the lifetime of the battery. So I just want to give you a taster of the complexity of the changes that were going on the electricity grid at the time. So this project was actually quite successful, and it won us the Best Project Award by IMechE that I'm still very proud of. Following on from this, I decided to do a PhD in smart local energy systems, and basically what happened here is I moved away from the grid-scale batteries, and now I started thinking about, wait a second, instead of one big grid-scale battery, what about applying the same algorithms I developed, but to smaller batteries that are scattered in neighborhoods? So the way that you can think about smart local energy systems can be as a futuristic neighborhood, where not everyone, but majority of the population is able to generate their own electricity from solar panels and store electricity using technologies like the Tesla Powerwall, if you're familiar with that, but also charging their electrical vehicles using on-wall chargers like you can see here. So essentially, these energy management algorithms can be applied to big-scale batteries and small-scale batteries. Again, from the first sentence, it sounds like, all right, that's again a like-for-like. But actually, you need a lot of small distributed batteries in order to supply the same level of services and energy as a big one. So this shouldn't come as a shock to you. So that's a great challenge, because now we need to aggregate many small batteries, install at people's homes across a neighborhood or a district, and then schedule them and optimize them to come on and off at the right time to be able to deliver the same services that these diesel generators used to deliver. And here, I want to again take a moment to thank a company who's been really a collaborator and has been influential in my career, Scene Community. They hosted me for 6 months, again, during my PhD. And I've done an industry secondment with them, and it helped me gain more industry experience and apply my algorithms in real-life settings. And Jim, who was my industry supervisor, is here today as well, supporting me. Thank you. So I will come back to this project later. I want to move on to the next step in my journey, which was doing a postdoctoral, working on a postdoctoral research project here at Edinburgh Uni again. This time on a slightly different topic. The project is called Dispatch. I've seen Sasha here somewhere at some point, there he is, who is leading the project, and we have quite a few partners. Again, I'll come back to this. But what I want to say here is that all of a sudden the smart technology I was modeling, again, has changed. This time we moved away from we didn't move away, but we moved on to different technologies, especially looking at how to decarbonize heating and cooling. And this is a very sensitive topic, because heating directly affects our thermal comfort, and there are vulnerable populations who will be very negatively affected if we get something wrong. So it's very important that we get the net zero transition in heating right, and this is what the Dispatch project aspires to do. So I've told you everything that I've done till this point, and you're aware that I hold this fellowship. And where do I see myself next? Well, if it doesn't sound too ambitious, I would like to join this movement of net zero transition up to 2050 and beyond, and contribute my expertise in a way where I can grow other people around me and make meaningful contribution to the transition. Well, at this point you might say, and having a look at this trajectory, wow, it really doesn't look like she has a life outside of work, and she's really dedicating her life to this. Well, you might be right, but I hope to prove you wrong at the drinks reception afterwards. So yeah, coming back to the geeky stuff, the challenge of net zero. So let's talk about that. We all hear about this term net zero from the media, it's on the news, it's on social media, it's everywhere. So what does it actually mean? It is basically a government commitment to ensure that the UK and also other countries to make sure that they reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 100% when compared to the 1990 levels. And we want to achieve this by 2050. So the question is, how far are we? Are we there yet? Are we really lagging behind? What's happening? You might also be familiar with headlines like this that says global cumulative solar PV capacity amounted to almost 2,000 gigawatts. And if I can find my pointer, perfect. Oops. Yep. And we can even see an exponential trend. So it looks like, well, we're doing really good. We're installing more and more solar generation. And China is leading, but Europe is, number 2. And there's a lot of development in, worldwide in different regions. But is that enough? Does that sound like enough energy? The other thing you might have seen is that the global car stock passed 10 million milestone in 2020. You'll notice, again, a very similar exponential trend. And, China heading ahead and Europe just behind. And quite a lot of uptake of electric vehicles. You'll even notice that I think we have around 16% penetration in the UK right now. So you'll be spotting them on the streets, or you probably know someone who has an EV if you don't own one yourself, or 2. But 10 million sounds like a good milestone, but there are still 1.45 billion cars on the world's roads. So we need to be careful about how we report things and how we also gauge things. While we're making progress, we're still not there. At this point, I want to ask you, how close do you think we are to net zero? So if 100% means that we're there, so we reduce our emissions from the level that we have now all the way down to the 1990 levels, how close do you think we are? Are we at 100%? Are we zero means we haven't made any progress at all? Are we at 50, 25, 75? I want to hear some guesses.
Negative 10.
Negative 10, okay. 5%, okay. 2. So I was surprised to find out a press release from the UK government that said that we're halfway to net zero. So I wanted to draw your attention to that and remind you that while we are making progress and we're on the way to net zero, we still have not achieved it, and there's a long way to go. And even if we were halfway there, then the remaining half, nobody's promising us that it will be as easy. So let's talk about how can we decarbonize energy systems. So I want to show you this graph, and some of you in the room will know this graph and where it came from, by heart, and the other ones will just look at it and say, okay, what is that? So let me talk you through it. If you just look at the top values here, what you're seeing is our collective energy demand. So this is what the system operator sees. So this is the beginning of the day, we're starting at midnight, and then you can see quite a low demand, which then picks up as human activity starts. So when people start waking up around 7, you'll see that it's picking up, and later on, it starts to taper down. So this dip is correlated with lunchtime. So here I want to show you how human activity is actually affecting our collective demand. And then later on, we have a pickup around the evening. This is around 5 p.m. when people finish work and start to come home, start cooking dinner, put the kettle on, turn the TV on, and so on. So all the little activities that we're doing in our everyday lives is actually, when aggregated, is making a huge difference on the electricity network. So if that is our demand, what you can see underneath is how we're meeting that demand. So looking at the previous screenshots, we're halfway there. We have almost 2,000 gigawatts of solar globally. We must be doing really good. That's the impression we get, right? But here what you'll see is at the bottom, we have some contribution from coal, even though we decommissioned majority of them. And then we have some majority of the demand met by closed circuit gas turbines, coal cycle gas turbines. So we know already that gas and coal are contributing to the problem. They're not helping us solve it. But in addition to that, we have nuclear in yellow, and then we have wind energy contributing there as well, and a bit of biomass and a few other things contributing very small amounts. So I wanted to show you kind of the contrast between what the headlines are saying versus what we can see on the energy systems. And this is open source data, and I would be happy to share it with you if you want to see it. The added challenge here, though, is that why do we have gas turbines? Why do we have coal? Why didn't we just use wind? First of all, it's not enough to meet the demand. But the second of all is the challenge to match demand and supply on a second-by-second basis. So you can think of it as it is a system that we can't turn off, and we need to meet the demand at all times. So that sounds quite grim. But there is something missing, well, a few things missing in this picture. The first thing is storage. The role of storage will actually help us shift the availability of resource. So if we have too much wind, we could store it, move to the time where we have high energy demand, and then dispatch it. The same goes for flexibility of demand. So if you're not familiar with this term, flexibility of demand, what I'm referring to is adjusting when we use energy. There are things that we can do as individuals, but there are also things that we can do collectively using smart algorithms to help coordinate and optimize our energy use. And the third thing that's missing from this image is the small assets. So there are lots of assets on the user side. So we mentioned the EV, there are the rooftop solar panels and so on, which are not visible to the system operator, hence they're not in this picture today. So we'll come back to these concepts later as well. But to be able to leverage this storage, flexibility, and the smaller distributed assets, what we need is data and smart algorithms that make decisions for us. Because let's be honest, we're not going to be on our phones every day checking, oh, is the wind blowing? Let me schedule my washing machine. Is the sun out? Let me start cooking. So that's why we need the algorithms to take on this role of making decisions. So to summarize a little bit of what I said there in one slide, while trying to decarbonize energy systems, we also ended up decentralizing it. So decentralize in the sense that now we have more assets on the user side, such as PV, battery, and EV, as I mentioned. But the problem here is that These millions of assets, they're trapped on the consumer side, and this makes them invisible to the system operator. But it's not that they're invisible, physically, it's just that we don't have data from them. So by collecting data, we can actually use it to optimize and automate, which would take us to basically this diagram. And this will help us achieve decarbonization in time. So what is the key challenge here? If we have the data, we can just do optimization, automation. Is it as easy as that? How can people and communities actually use these technologies today, but also beyond in 2030 when we're going to have higher penetrations of these assets, and 2050 and beyond? And how can we actually coordinate them, not just for the sake of cost savings, but also reducing our carbon footprint? So as we mentioned, data-driven methods in tandem with also digital technologies, so things like smart metering, but also smart contracting that I will explain in a bit, can help us unlock value not only from these distributed assets, such as your neighbor's Nissan Leaf, but also industrial and commercial assets like a Tesla Megapack. And if you don't want to take my word for it, don't worry, it's not just me who is shouting this from the rooftops. The Energy Data Task Force that was commissioned by Innovate UK, BASE, and the Office for Gas and Electricity Markets, Ofgem, says that data is crucial for building a smart system that can achieve these objectives on time. And not only that, they go one step beyond to say, if we use data effectively, we can actually save cost by £40 billion. That's not negligible. In the same report, they also go on to say that there's a huge talent gap, especially in the UK, but in Europe, about people who can work in data, who understand energy systems, and who have an engineering background. So this is the gap, talent gap, that I'm trying to fill through this fellowship, and also gather people around me, inspire and motivate to bring talent in this area to accelerate our pathway to decarbonization. So I think I gave you the background, the problem statement, and now I want to tell you a little bit about, in this third part out of the 5, what is my net zero research, and give you some case studies and give you a taster of the ongoing projects. So I won't be able to talk about all of my projects today, so I wanted to give you my focus areas with some rhetorical questions. And then I will give you a taster of actual projects. There might be some graphs, but stay with me. So I gathered these into 4 key areas. First one being the smart local energy systems. You'll notice that this is my background. I have my PhD in this. And it is all about how can we decarbonize in a decentralized way. So looking at a neighborhood, for instance, how can we make sure that people consume energy when it's available locally from renewable sources? In addition to this, I also work in buying and selling of energy amongst the community members, also known as peer-to-peer trading, but you don't need to worry about that. The other area that's close to my heart, and there's a lot of research happening within the Institute for Energy Systems at the School of Engineering here, is net zero heating and cooling. And what I love about this is that it has the ethos of leaving no one behind. So it's not just about finding the most cost-effective solution, or the one that's going to make a service operator the most money, or not even the one that will help us decarbonize this sector the quickest, but it's actually focusing on how can we do this in a sustainable way from multiple angles. I want to remind you that it wasn't long ago when we saw in the headlines heat or eat. So there are people in a situation right now, well, at least over the winter they were, where they need to choose whether they should heat a room in their homes or whether they should cook and eat. So fuel poverty and energy justice are very important, and they're echoed within the projects that we do here at the School of Engineering. The third area is AI and digital technologies. And here, while not being an expert in AI, what I aspire to do and what I'm trying to do is how can we bring technology from other sectors into energy systems that will help us reach net zero. So it could be AI for decision making, and it can be things like smart contracting that I'll come to in a bit. Oops. Yeah, perfect. So the last area I want to talk about is climate responsive energy systems, and this is a recent area of passion for me. As you know, there has been an increasing number of extreme weather events and also extreme climate events and disasters, things like wildfires, storms, flooding, and many more that we know from our own experience. And this means that now, in addition to decarbonizing, we need to do two things at the same time. We need to decarbonize, and we also have to future-proof the grid. So how can we achieve decarbonization and resilience at the same time? And it is a key challenge that is creeping up on us. So let me start with a nice example of how my research has been applied to a real context. So what you can see here is the grid connection. Basically, all the cables and lines are the cables that connect to your homes. And this is specifically looking at 3 different neighborhoods in Aberdeenshire. Here with Scene Community, we were looking at how we can simulate energy systems in 2032. What was the gap? So we need more effective coordination of increased volumes of distributed assets. So these assets are electric vehicles, heat pumps. I think it was, if I can remind myself, 15% EV penetration, 9% heat pump penetration, and 5% solar and battery penetration by 2032. We expected these values and these assets to be there. So the system operator was basically saying, okay, that's a lot of load to be added to be connecting to the existing cables. How do we coordinate that? And how do we do that effectively? The solution that we came up with was to use optimization and also trading that ensures system stability and that made sure to take into account user needs and comforts. The outcome in return was 7% carbon savings, 10 to 15% reduction in consumer bills, depending on the assets they had, which roughly translates to £200 annually. And the mix of data-driven models and past data actually also helped us understand how the energy system looks like today, but how it will look like in the future, 2030 and beyond. The other outcome I missed to mention is a trade-off that I found in my PhD project, which looked at how we can come up with carbon-aware local energy trading. So trading often sounds to us like, oh, I need to be making profit, economic profit, but actually there are ways we can design algorithms that will help us reduce carbon. But without boring you with this, basically what I want to highlight here is that all of this research I'm talking about is actually on the basically brink of happening, and there has been some industry collaboration in my career that helped me apply to the real world. So moving on to smart contracting, I dropped a few hints about this. Now I'll actually tell you what it is, because we're used to this smart being in front of all the key phrases we talk about, right? Smart grid, smartphone, smart contract. But don't get scared by this. A smart contract is basically almost the same as a contract. So it starts off with an agreement between people. So let's say that I'm the electricity system operator, and you guys have electric vehicles. And I'm in trouble, and I need to ask you to pause charging your EVs for the next 15 minutes. This would require an agreement between us. After the agreement, we can actually establish a smart contract, which would be half in prose and also some code. And what's the beauty of the smart contract is that without me having to come and check whether you paused charging your EV for the next 15 minutes, the smart contract is able to communicate with your EV charger and your smart meter to show me that you actually paused charging and delivered the service that I was asking for. And if you haven't done that to the extent that I asked for 15 minutes and you've done the 10 minutes and you decided, no, I need to charge because I'm going to go out to do some shopping, that's fine. We can adjust the execution of value transfer accordingly. So we can apply some penalties and also some incentives. What this will help with us is it will help us deal with increased volumes of energy data and also help us adopt decentralized technology in energy systems. So instead of using, again, coming back to that one big grid scale battery, now if I'm able to find the same volume by bringing together 50 EVs, this technology will help me coordinate with them and automate that process, virtually creating more batteries that are connected to our system. So this technology comes from blockchain, and it has its roots there. So we, in our work, have looked at how we can apply it in an isolated way as well. And the outcome is that we believe it will accelerate automation of energy systems, and there are various impacts, but what I wanted to highlight here is that we published the first open source code on this, so if you're interested, I would be very happy to pick it up later on. Moving on to the next project, again, where I've already dropped some hints and clues here and there, but it's a dispatch project, which is, again, very close to my heart because of its leave no one behind ethos, but also because I worked on it as a researcher, and I was fortunate enough to now join Daniel, Aristides, Sasha, I don't know if Andronik is here, yeah, there, and Zafar as a co-investigator on this project. So right now, almost 80% of the homes in the UK are using centralized heating, which is relying on gas for space heating. We know we need to change this, right? It's not helping, and we will need to transition from it, but how will we do it? Dispatch project looks at this and tries to do multi-vector energy systems. You don't need to worry too much about the simulations. What I want to highlight here is that we're trying to achieve justice in the energy transition by doing this, not just considering the technology itself, but considering the impacts on the communities, especially vulnerable populations. And the impact that we foresee will come through working with policymakers and regulators, making our models open source when it comes to both the multi-vector energy power plants, but also optimization and decision making. Tagging on this and moving on to the last theme, I wanted to mention the TNGR project as well. It has a similar outlook in the sense that it's still within the umbrella of net zero heating and cooling, but this time we're working with urban climate scientists who are doing modeling of heat islands in the cities, and we're collaborating for this project with China's Shanghai Jiaotong University. This brings me to the last focus area of this section. And one project that I really want to put the highlight on is the DRESS project. This is the first project that I'm leading, so it is important to me, and I'm probably overdoing it, but I'll get there. I think I have a lot of things to learn from people who've done this job here before. So the DRESS project is all about resilience and increasing resilience of the grid when it comes to extreme weather events. It's a small project, and I'm collaborating with Dr. Suto from Bristol, who will be visiting me here in the next few months. And we're looking at how we can coordinate electric vehicles during extreme weather events, actually prior to the weather fronts arriving, but once they're here. So think about it like this. If there's a storm coming, and you know that it might affect one of the cables, electricity cables that comes to your home, or it might affect the wind farm nearby, and we know there's a risk we might have to turn it down because the wind and the gusts are just too strong. Can we keep the lights on using our batteries and the EVs that we have connected? Can we stop charging or prepare in advance just to keep the lights and the heating on? So this is the doomsday scary scenario we're looking at. And I know that it might sound a little bit far-fetched right now, but data shows that there has been an increase in blackouts, and there will be an increase in extreme weather events in the coming years. So this comes back to that duality that I was speaking about. How can we increase resilience, but also future-proof the grid? So this project is almost a tangent from a bigger project that we work on, which is called the EPSRC VPP World. This is quite a big project with lots of academic and industry partners. And it has a slightly different angle in the sense that it's using physics-informed AI to make decisions. For this, at the School of Engineering, we now have a team of machine learning specialists and power systems engineers working together to see how we can actually coordinate and prepare for extreme weather events happening with the use of AI. And Mohammed and Edward are here who are helping us with that. Last one, I promise. And then I'm going to move on to the fun things. But I wanted to mention this project, even though it's not complete, because I want to give a huge kudos to the students, to my students who are working on this with me. SolarWill has been a dream on hold for me for a while. I thought I will squeeze it into my PhD project, That was too ambitious. Then I thought maybe I'll get to it later on during dispatch. Then COVID happened. And now it is finally happening, so I'm very excited to share it. This is not a photo from our own demonstration. Unfortunately, ours is still happening. You can see a little mock-up here. It will look prettier in the future, but a lot of work went into it. I'm not going to bore you with all the cables underneath, but that is the hard work of Arif, Jack, and Chun. And we're basically, what we're trying to do is create a tabletop smart grid demonstrator that will help me explain what I do, but also what my colleagues do within the same institute better and actually visualize what's happening. So our ambition is to simulate different weather modes and also local energy exchanges in the smart village. And we want to use it to showcase our work to industry, to academia visitors, at outreach events, and just generally increase awareness about our work, but also motivate people. I think it really helps to see what you're doing and to have something tangible rather than say, you know, I have an algorithm on this and I have an algorithm on that, but I can't show it to you because it's too boring. You know, whereas, look, here's a house, here's a solar panel, and I can charge the battery when the solar panel is generating, and that's what my algorithm does, deciding when the battery is charging. So moving on from this, and here are some more pretty pictures of the things that we've done. Again, I mean, I've written this in this slide, but credit goes to Jack, Arif, and Chun. And you can't see it in operation here. It was just too complicated to bring it today. But you can actually see their outputs here. We're trying to, you know, read different signals from the panel, from the solar panel, displayed on the LCD display here of what's happening within each house. And slowly, this will grow into a village. So last two parts. Thank you for sticking through that with me. Now I want to take a step back and talk to you about the key challenges and actually also call on you to take some action. So today I talked about some technologies. Some of them might have been very new to you and might sound, you know, that's not going to work. And the other ones might be like, all right, okay, we need this right now. But all of them, actually none of them, are the silver bullet. And that's exactly what I want to bring your attention to. There is no perfect solution. There is no easy fix to net zero. And there is still a long way to go, but we're making progress. First thing I want to say, you'll notice I use the word data countless times in this presentation. But data is not something that comes, you know, for free. It has a carbon footprint of its own. The Databerg report shows that in 2020, there were around 6 million tons of CO2 emissions coming from dark data. So dark data is nothing scary. It's basically data that just sits there, we collect, and we never use. This might be the photos you never visit, might be the emails that you never read, or might be, you know, data from actual projects. Just to put this in context, if we wanted to store all of the emissions from this dark data, we would need 36 million trees. So that's a lot. And that's also the same as the UK's population increasing by 1.5 million. So that's, just to put it in context, that's not easy, you know, we can't just disregard that. So we need to be very careful when we propose solutions that are data-driven, especially for scaling them up, because data-hungry and energy-intensive practices will have both cost and carbon emissions. The other point, or the other challenge, is that data, okay, it's easy to collect from a data that, you know, from a house that does not have inhabitants, but some people will not share their data with you. And that's okay, that's justified, but we need to find a way to incentivize users to actually share their data with us, and you can actually do something about it, which I'll mention in the next few slides. And the last two challenges, first one being privacy-preserving energy systems. While it is a solution, it is still a big challenge to store data and achieve privacy-preserving energy systems using smart contracting or similar technologies, but in a decentralized fashion. And you probably spotted that I said smart contracting comes from blockchain, and blockchain is usually associated with Bitcoin. We know that Bitcoin used to consume as much energy as the Netherlands on an annual basis. It might be higher or lower now. This is 2 years old. But again, when we look at the data centers worldwide, you'll also notice that they're consuming double the energy that Netherlands is consuming. So that's, again, some food for thought for you. And lastly, which I think is something that we always need to bring with us to whatever solution we come up with, is heat or eat, or actually thinking about vulnerable populations and how the solutions we come up with will affect different populations. And how can we come up with a solution that leaves no one behind? As engineers, we can't do this on our own. It requires close collaboration with social scientists and with policymakers to understand what are the implications of the solutions we're trying to push. And that's just to remind you how much our bills used to be, because now that it's summer, we all forgot all about the price cap. We forgot about what's happening in Europe and beyond, and all the wars that's happening around the world. But it has a huge, huge impact on energy pricing, and it brings some populations to the decision of should we heat or should we eat. So I don't want to leave on a negative note before I move on to acknowledgements. So how can we tackle this? And don't worry, I'm on it. I'm one person, but I'm trying to call on others to join me in this effort as well. And I know many of you here are already converted and you're already doing your best in the net zero transition. But the combination of people, digitalization, and data, if we're careful about the carbon footprint, will actually help us get there. But we need input from all of them. None of them work on their own. It's like trying to use an AI algorithm with no data input. So we need people, and we need digital technologies, and we need data, but we need to do this in a very conscious way. So how can you help? It's not just about listening to what I've done and all the doomsday scenarios that I brought up today. Hopefully you weren't discouraged. But you can actually help us. Within the Dispatch project, our colleagues at Informatics have devised a 5 to 10 minute survey, and we're trying to study energy flexibility. So just to remind you, the flexibility here is about adjusting when you use energy, how you use energy, and how changing the way you use it or the time you consume energy can save you money, but also benefit the grid. So there is also an online tool after the questionnaire, if you manage to go through it all, which can actually help you see the potential savings yourself. So if you don't mind, take a quick photo of this, and I'll move on to my acknowledgements, and then we can head to the drinks reception where I'll prove to you that I'm a fun person. Great. This also goes for people online. Yeah, they're probably doing it. Awesome. So the last part. As I said, I said in the very beginning, but it's a great honor to be here and to have the chance to talk about what I do or my vision for the future of energy systems and beyond. But I wouldn't be here if I wasn't in the right environment and if I wasn't supported by many colleagues who, some of them supporting me from day one, some of them recently giving me the little push to get a grant submission in. And whether academic, industrial, or at whatever career it is, I've received a lot of support and help, and I'm immensely grateful for it, and I hope it shows. But first, I would like to start with thanking my mentors and role models. And then I'm not going to mention names because I feel people know who they are. But my collaborators, my students, who believe in my crazy ideas and jump on board with me and, try to make things like this. And my family and friends, in particular, Gabrielis, without whom this would have been extremely difficult. I also want to acknowledge the Agile Energy Research Group, which is headed by Aristides here, and just to draw your attention to the fact that this is before I got the fellowship or anything happened, I think maybe even before Dispatch. But small things like this and supporting gender balance in engineering and putting a highlight on this, I think makes a huge difference in retaining people. And I would like to encourage other people to do similar things as well, which I know many of you do, but for the ones who thought about it but didn't have the time and so on. I also want to thank IES colleagues, people who are in the picture and not in the picture and beyond, who have cheered me on whether I won an award or not. They were always there for me, and I really truly appreciate the support, and they're always happy to listen to, again, my crazy research ideas over a coffee in the kitchen, which I'm very grateful for. And lastly, I want to draw your attention, thank my family and my mom, who is at the front row, representing all of the family back home in Cyprus. But in the beginning, I told you, stay tuned. I'm going to give you a little clue about how Elizabeth, Georgeson, and I have something else in common. On Monday, I was fortunate enough to be invited to the Women's Engineering Society's award reception, where I was named as one of the top 50 women in engineering. And as I said before, Elizabeth Georgeson was an early member there, so it was a great honor to walk on stage and receive this award, holding a fellowship in her name. So I think that was a really nice way to close the circle. So last few words here. If you're taking away just one thing from this talk, I hope that it is some inspiration. Doesn't matter what career stage you're in or your background, just to know that great things are happening within the space, and I hope you can join us in this drive to net zero. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was amazing and inspiring, and I loved the full circle that came around as well. And that's amazing to hear what happened on Monday. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Please, let's thank Desen again. And then we get to see the second part that was promised early on in the talk as well. So please come through as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.